Assalamu alaikum. In prior segments, we've talked about many different concepts. In this segment, we will bring all of these concepts into a practical insight that should guide our behavior in this life. But first, let me tell you about a simple story that took place with me personally a number of years ago. I was the communication director of the Islamic Center in the state where I used to live in the United States. I was in charge of the community newsletter, and I had an article to write about a visiting professor from a famous university in the United States. That professor was coming to the state to participate in a community event to give the keynote speech. I asked that professor for a private meeting with him, and he agreed, and we sat down, and I was very impressed with his beautiful explanation of Islam and his great insight into the Islamic history and the conditions and the circumstances that surround the Islamic community all over the world today and in the past. In fairness, this professor was not only an academic who taught about Islam, but he was also an advisor to the State Department and also an advisor at various councils that reported to the President of the United States. I asked that professor a very simple question. Why are you then not a Muslim, since you talk about Islam so beautifully? He said, if you understood La ilaha illallah, you would know that it's not your place to ask me that question. I will continue with this story toward the end of this segment, but let me explain a little bit about what I understood from that reply from that professor. Understanding La ilaha illallah requires of me that I refuse to place myself in a position of judgment over anybody else. That part is simple and understood. But more than that, it implies and requires of me that I do not attach my faith and my belief and my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I do not attach any of those to the behavior or the decisions of any other human being. Our faith, our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is purely one-on-one, and it does not have to go through any intermediaries. Therefore, neither I can judge you, nor you should judge me. I may have reached different conclusions than yours, and you may have reached different conclusions than mine, and that's fine for me in my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What you might want to label yourself, that's your decision. Allah knows what's in your heart, regardless of what you label or what other people label yourself. Allah is the creator and the sustainer of all His creation. And therefore, regardless of how we label ourselves or how we describe our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah knows, and there might be differences that appear to us as differences because of our limited understanding and limited knowledge, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees through the diversity, sees through all the differences, and understand what's in our heart. What you accept as credible or authoritative may not be acceptable to me, and vice versa. What you accept as evidence to the existence of Allah may not be acceptable to me, may not be sufficient to me. And it's okay, because I may have to continue searching for a more convincing evidence, depending on my level of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And finally, what you may consider important in your relationship with Allah, in terms of how you communicate with Allah, how you submit to Allah, how you worship Allah in all your devotional activities, you may consider these to be the most important for you. I may consider other forms to be important for me. As the doctor sometimes may give you the medicine in a liquid form or in a pill form or an injection form, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us differently and understands this variation and this diversity and will accept this diversity in how we relate and communicate with Him. In Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, truth is from your Lord. Therefore, whoever wants to believe, let him believe. and whoever wants to reject and deny, let him reject and deny. This attitude of understanding La ilaha illallah as independent from the approval or the convictions of any other human being is very important to us in understanding the famous verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, La ikraha fi din, let there be no compulsion in matters of religion. And this includes Islam. And therefore, some people may consider extra fasting as the way to devote themselves to Allah, and that's fine for them. Others may consider extra prayers as their way of showing love and submission to Allah, and that's fine for them. Others may consider reading the Quran incessantly or several times a week or a day, and that's fine for them. Others may consider diving into the meanings and the revelations inspired by few verses a week and spending all of that time reflecting about Allah's intention behind these verses, and that's fine for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept every form of devotion. We are not like animals. We are given free will, and we are asked to communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this attitude is not something new. Muslims historically and traditionally have practiced this great objective way to be liberal toward others in their expressions of faith and in their expressions of relating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Muslims have understood that the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala vary, and they are as diverse as Allah's creation. Great contemporary Muslim philosophers such as Martin Lings or Charles Le Guy Eaton or Frithjof Schuon, all of them died within the last couple of decades, all have reached the same conclusion that there are multiple paths toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This understanding has also shown historically in our tradition, in our history. For example, in Damascus, when the Muslims first took control of the city and governed over that great eastern city of the Levant, they did not force anyone to follow the practices of Islam. In other words, for the 3 centuries that followed Muslims first entering into Damascus, the majority of the occupants of Damascus remained non-Muslim. More importantly, in India, Muslims ruled over India for over 1,000 years, and yet for all of that time, the majority of people in India remained non-Muslims. So therefore, this is not a way to make Islam acceptable in an age where the majority of Western media outlets have decided that Islam is the common enemy. No, this is a practice that Muslims have universally practiced, as testified to by Professor Thomas, who is a British academic and who published a great book called The Preaching of Islam, published in 1913. And I believe that book is out of copyright protection and you can easily find it on the web. In that book, Professor Arnold proved that Islam never spread by force. As a matter of fact, he proved that every single condition where Islam spread rapidly was because of the peaceful nature of allowing other people to take it up on their own and to accept a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any pressure from any institution or any government. This is testified to by the fact that today Islam is the fastest spreading religion in the world, as testified by so many statistics and so many reports. So in conclusion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala summarizes everything I've talked about in this segment in one beautiful verse. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, يا أيها الذين آمنوا عليكم أنفسكم لا يضركم من ضل إذا اهتديتم إلى الله مرجعكم جميعا فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. O you who believe, worry only about yourselves. It does not hurt you if someone goes astray while you choose to seek guidance. To Allah is your ultimate return, all of you, and He shall tell you about all of the things in which you were engaged. And thus, we return to the conclusion of my story with that professor I started with. I understood from that challenge by that professor to me that my faith and my certainty do not depend on others, do not depend on whether or not I see certain person becoming a Muslim or not becoming a Muslim. More importantly, I understood that in order for me to have a pure relationship with Allah alone, I should get rid of all the phobias and all the expectations and all the fears and all the convictions that I have inherited from others. Therefore, I should move from a belief based on following others to a belief based on my own certainty and my own relationship with Allah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all that type of belief based on certainty and based on an exclusive relationship with Him alone. Thank you for watching.